Alrighty, so our target species lack population and range data in the state of Montana that contribute to their conservation status. And we'll get into more of that in a little bit, but both of our species are species of greatest inventory need in Montana, which basically means that they're the highest ranking of lacking data. So that kind of makes it a challenge on what other statuses they need and what conservation efforts they require. So those survey materials were built upon past research done by Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. Like some of the survey sites have been surveyed by park technicians, and then protocols are matching past protocols on what they've already done. And then survey sites are located in Montana in areas that are lacking data. So if you look at the survey map for all of our sites, they're a little bit scattered, which can be frustrating in around some big cities. But that's just to make sure that we're going out and collecting data that needs to be collected and not just going out and for fun, because we don't really want to waste anyone's time here with what needs to be done. But Montana Audubon, I'm Gwen, so I'll be organizing all the volunteers for this survey. So you can reach out to my email at any point with questions or how to get involved further. So getting into what a nightjar actually is, nightjars were discovered, well, not discovered, they were named in the 17th century Europe after people were noticing them on their farms, and they would describe their calls during the nighttime as jarring. Some back in time slang with that, but nightjars belong to the Caprimulgidae family, which contains nightjars and alleys, and allies are just groups of birds or different birds that fall into that category without being in the actual family. And they're also in the Caprimulgiformes order, so it's also the nightjars and alleys. But they are groups of medium crepuscular or diurnal. So the difference between those two, they're both active at dawn and dusk, but diurnal focuses mainly on sight. So the birds will catch their prey, in this case insects, using their sight mainly, like common nighthawks. And then crepuscular is animals that rely on vibrations or sound to catch their prey. So that's some new fun vocabulary for some birding. And then nocturnal birds as well, known for their jarring calls. Nightjars are also referred to as goat suckers. They were named this because people were like on their farms in Europe in the 17th century, and they were noticing all of these birds in the nighttime calling, but then they were also noticing that they were hanging out around livestock. And this is just because usually insects hang out around like cows and goats and different domestic livestock like that. And so then they had this superstition that during the nighttime, they would milk the goats with their wide mouths. So that's another thing about nightjars, is that they have wide mouths and flat heads and pretty long wings. So in Montana, we have two of these species. We have common nighthawks and common porwills, which are the species that we are focusing on for this project. So the difference between these two species as their role within the project is that common nighthawks are our target species. So they're the ones that we're focusing on using the protocol, but common porwills are our incidental species just because of their similarities in habitat and locations throughout the state. So this protocol is specific to common nighthawks, which it uses passive listening mainly. So if we were to do a common porwill survey, then we would actually use a playback call, which is just a recording of the birds' calls and sounds. But in this case, we're just using passive listening, so we can't focus or we can't call the common porwill our target species just because it doesn't match the protocol. But this collects data on both species of nighthawks and porwills, just because porwills are around the same places, especially in this project where there are 34 sites that were previously surveyed by Fish, Wildlife, and Parks technicians as porwill sites, and they were doing a different protocol, but they'll be in the same location. So there is a likelihood that if you do any of those sites, that you might hear some porwills or see some on the road. So that can be a little exciting. But with going into common nighthawks, natural history and ecology, so common nighthawks, they're scientific name is Cordelis minor. So Cordelis genus is the nighthawk species genus. There are 6 nighthawk species worldwide, and breaking that the first part of the name down, chorea is a dance with music, and then deal is evening. So the first part of that refers to their booming display, which they do. So when a common nighthawk is near its breeding season, and this will happen in Montana as well, just because we're in its breeding range, um, male common nighthawks will fly high up into the air and then kind of dive bomb straight down. And then when they get near the ground, they will flex their wings outward, and then this kind of makes a loud booming sound. And that's just to impress the ladies. And the music part of that, I'm sorry, the deal part of that is the evening. So these birds are diurnal, so they forage for insects in the air during the evening time and the morning time. So this bird was first recorded in 1778, but it was known by native populations way longer than that. But there were fossils found around the US dating back 400,000 years. Unfortunately, Montana was still covered in ice around this time. So there are no fossils in Montana, but they can be found as far north as Wyoming and as far south as Texas, but they can be found coast to coast. And its nickname is the bull bat. So it's named the bull bat because it kind of flies like a bat, but it's a lot bigger than different bats. So the bull bat is just like a nickname of that. Um, so like an example of that is if you're ever at Spring Meadow State Park in Helena, you can see these guys on a warm summer night over the lake here. And then common nighthawks will fly around near dawn and dusk, and then after they leave, the bats will come in, and they are significantly smaller than the nighthawks, and they fly closer to the water. So going into the common porwells, a little bit difficult to pronounce, but Phalaenoptilus natale is their scientific name. So Phalaenoptilus means breaks down in Greek to Phalania, which means moth, and then Tylen or plumage, and that's just saying that it's moth-like the way it looks, which their plumage is supposed to camouflage into the leaf litter that they roost in and nest in. And then Natali, the second part of that is in honor of a zoologist or botanist, Thomas Nodal, but he did not name this bird. The bird was actually named by Robert Ridgway in 1880, so only 4 years after the Nighthawks were named. And then they were nicknamed the Sleeping One by the Hopi people by their use of torpor, which we'll get into that a little later, but it's kind of like if these birds were to short-term hibernate, which is pretty unique to them and a few other species. So going into their ecology, their habitat is grasslands and open areas. They are kind of less picky with their habitat compared to common porwells, and they're found in both rural and urban areas. And they really like moonlight or different light. So when you're doing surveys, it might be worth it to wait for a full moon because the light, they're diurnal, so they hunt by eyesight and they have really good eyesight. They can actually contract and expand their pupil to differentiate how much light goes in their eyes. And so then another example of that is if there's lights on a billboard, you might see common nighthawks there foraging in the billboard lights or in street lights. Both of these species do like to hang out in roadways, which is something to be aware of when you're surveying them. But they're diurnal aerial insectivores, so they hunt by light and insects in flight, midair, dawn and dusk. And then they migrate in flocks and have one of the longest migration routes. So they can go far north as Canada, but then they can also go far south as like in the mid part of South America, which is a pretty long route and of any North American bird. And then they're ground nesters, so they don't really build nests. They just kind of lay their eggs unsheltered directly on the ground. And then like this photo is a great example, but it's usually 2 eggs per clutch on average. So going into common porwell's ecology, so they like open areas, but they're pretty picky in the shrubby open areas. So they like shrubs, they like leaf litter. They are also ground nesters. but sometimes they'll gather a few leaves, but not really. So you can see here, here's a little nestling, just sitting on some rocks and leaves. And then they are also diurnal and nocturnal. So you can hear these guys way later into the night than if you were to see or hear common nighthawks. And they watch for insects while perched and then catch them in the air, which is a little different because common nighthawks just kind of fly around and catch whatever they can find. Um, but they also roost during the day in bushes and leaf litter, and then in cold snaps. So they still migrate. They have a far less far migration route, but they still migrate to southern US and northern Mexico, but they use torpor in like if there's a cold snap or a day of colds, they will slow down their heart rate and their body functions, and then that will conserve energy. So then they could just kind of sleep and then wake up when it's warm and go back to normal and start catching insects again. So going into how to identify both of these birds, the build of a common nighthawk, their wingspan is about double the size of their body size. So they're 9-inch birds, so they're a medium-sized bird. And they have, like other nightjars, they have a small flat head with a really wide mouth and a tiny beak. And their plumage is brown, buff, black, or white. So that kind of varies, but common porwills will have a more like rich coloration than these guys do. They have a little bit more white in their plumage, but they have white wing patches near the bend of their wing, as you can see in that top photo. And this is unique to them. Common porwills do not have this. And then adult males also have a thicker white neck band and a tail band as well. And then their call is like a buzzy or nasally pink call in flight, is what they say. And then um, sounds never work on PowerPoint, so this is going to be played through my phone. But this recording will have the call in the beginning, and then it'll make the dive bomb or the boom sound. So hopefully this doesn't sound too horrible coming off my phone speaker. So that boom sound was pretty faint. There's actually no good videos of it online, or else we would be watching it in this presentation, but hopefully you kind of get the point. And also you can look more into different sounds by them on Xenocanto or All About Birds, and they have some pretty good recordings. So going into how to identify a common porwheel, they're a little bit smaller with about equal size body size and wingspan, or time like 1.5 times wingspan. So they have a little bit shorter wings than the common nighthawk. And they, like nighthawks and other nightjars, they also have a small flat head with a tiny beak and a really wide mouth. And they also have pointier wings than nighthawks, but their plumage is a little bit richer. They are more buffy brown, black, and gray, and their white neckband is a lot thinner than the common nighthawks, and then their song is a repeated or sound. Okay, so playing on my phone again. Hopefully it worked the first time. Not hearing anyone say that it sounded horrible, which is good, but this is the poor sound. Okay, and that can be heard usually around summer nights and near grasslands. So going into the differences between them, we touched on this briefly, but I'll just go over it again. So common nighthawks have a much bigger wingspan, and then they also have white bars on their wings and also a thicker white neckband. And then their calls are a really great difference between them. So the common nighthawks have a buzzy pink call, and then the porwills have that porwillip call, pretty similar to the one at the eastern whip porwill found in the eastern United States. And then the common nighthawk is more active on dawn and dusk, compared to the poor will, which can be heard at dawn and dusk and also during the nighttime. So going into their status in Montana and nationally, and also their conservation. So the common nighthawk, they have a much wider breeding range. So you could see in this photo, the orange is their summer range or their breeding range. So it's pretty much all of the United States, Canada, and going into parts of Mexico. And then the yellow is their migration range or their like route from their breeding range to their wintering range. There are year-round ones in Cuba and um, different parts of the Atlantic Ocean, but then their wintering range is mainly in South America. So they are a species that is common, but they're also secure but declining within their range. And this is mainly from pesticide use. So pesticides kill a lot of the insects that they hunt and eat. And then they also are subject to habitat fragmentation and urban expansion and agriculture development. So in Montana, their rank is a S5 or secure, but they're also classified as a species of greatest inventory need, and they lack information in different parts of the state. So for the goal for common nighthawks in this is to generate more information on this species and to build a baseline for distribution and assess the status and trend over time with their population. So for common porwills up here, it only shows them in eastern Montana, but below you could see a map from the Natural Heritage Program. Sorry, I'm trying to monitor the chat as well. But below you could see the maps from Natural Heritage Program of where they've been observed in Montana. So they've pretty much been observed everywhere in Montana in the last 5 years or different parts of it. So it's pretty scattered. So they are a S4 in Montana, which is apparently secure and listed as a potential species of concern and also a species of greatest inventory need. And the potential species of concern is that we don't know the extent of how much we should be concerned about them. And then initial survey efforts were conducted by FWP in 2024, which is where some of the routes come in that already have points. And that was to build a baseline for distribution and assess status and trend over time. So their efforts have already been started. So there are incidental species. So nighthawks, this is their first project in recent years. So they're going to be the target of all of these surveys. And their baseline was obtained in 2024 from those surveys. And now we're continuing to fill data gaps through the state with the routes that we're doing. So here's where all of you guys come in. So this is a citizen science survey, which just includes public participation in scientific research, is a simple way to define it. But it really involves local communities in conservation issues and solutions, and it also advances public knowledge of science and natural resources by getting people out and involved. And then this also allows for more valuable data to be collected across wider ranges compared to what, say, like a group of scientists could do. So citizen scientists could collect so much more data, and then this increases the confidence level of the data set by having more of the data, and then that results in a deeper understanding of the data that we get back and creates more informed conservation and management practices. So getting into the protocol, the survey sites, and our data collection, everything that we're going to go over is found on our citizen science website, and you can find that here at montanabirdsurveys.weebly.com, and that will also be linked in most of the emails that I send out for the survey. So starting with the protocol, this survey will take place between June 1st and August 10th, and in that you'll only have to go out and survey your site 1 or 2 times, depending on how many people are there. But this survey takes place 60 minutes before sunset, and ends 90 minutes after sunset. So you'll have to account for driving time when you get to your survey site. And then the conditions that we want to survey in, oh, sorry. The conditions that we want to survey in are when 40 degrees or warmer. And then also, please do not survey in 20 miles an hour winds or greater. This is both because there'll be less birds out and that it will affect how much you can hear. And it's also just not pleasant to be out in 20-mile-an-hour winds at the nighttime. So yeah, and then also to not survey in rain, this will not result in, well, this will not follow our data set, and like this will affect how many birds will be out. So an occasional drizzle is okay, but if rain persists, then it might be best to reschedule your survey. So the method of data collection that we're doing in this protocol is using either, we want to collect two independent data sets for each route. So this either consists of a double observer method or a single observer method, going out and surveying twice. So the double observer method pretty much just means that you bring a friend to survey at the same time, but you guys don't communicate during the survey period. So what that would look like is you guys will park your car, like turn it off and get out. And then each of you will stand on different sides of the vehicle. So like one will be at the front of the car and then one will be at the back. And then both of you guys will just be silently listening for Poor Wills and Nighthawks for 6 minutes and then also scanning with binoculars. And then both of you will record what you hear and see in those 6 minutes afterwards. So then after that, both of you guys will submit your own data, and this can be done in Survey 123 or through a paper data sheet. So doing that method, that will be you guys will be on the same route the whole time, surveying together, and that will only require one visit to the survey site in the route. Or you can conduct the survey twice by yourself. And in that, you want to conduct your surveys, both surveys within a 14-day time period. So you could go out one night and then go out the next night, or you could go out one night and then wait 2 weeks and then do it on the 14th day. And then between both times, you want to survey the same spots that you did the first time, just to ensure accurate data. And then you also want to not review what you heard and saw the first time, just to not have a bias of, oh, you slightly hear a bird, but you're not sure about it, but you might have heard that bird the first time, so you're going to write that down, which that would be a little bit biased, and that might skew some results. So just to not review what you heard or saw the first time. So going into the passive surveys, so this is what you'll do at each of the stops. You'll just turn off your vehicle and headlights, and then you'll get out and observe and listen with binoculars for 6 minutes. And then if you detect any nighthawks, you will either put the type of call that you heard of their like common peep call or their booming display. Or if you heard both of them, you'll also put that on Survey 123 or your data sheet. And then you'll collect data for each individual Nighthawk, whether you heard it or saw it at each stop. So incidental surveys, this basically means that you're in between survey sites, and then you will see one of these birds on a road or hear them in between sites. You can fill out an incidental survey form, which is also in that app. It's just listed under a different protocol. So any bird that you hear within that 6 minutes is going to be in the Common Nighthawks protocol. The passive listening one is what it's called. But in between survey sites, this would be the incidental survey. And then another note on this is that we really only want records of it if you're absolutely confident that like you heard a common four-wheel or saw a common four-wheel or nighthawk. So some differences, well, some similarities in appearance, especially when you're driving and you could only see like a flash of it. So nighthawks you tend to see their white flash on their wings whenever they fly away. And then poor wills don't have that, which is a good difference. And then another difference that I learned last week actually is that Four wheels have a pink eye shine when you see them in your headlights, and then Nighthawks have a yellow eye shine. So both of those should be recorded if you see them on the road, and these guys do love to hang out and forage on roadways, so also just please don't run them over if you come across them if you can help it. So going into our data collection, we will be using Survey 123 again. If you did our OWL survey, then you already have the form that you need uploaded. This also uses the nocturnal calling survey. If not, then you could go to your app store and look up Survey 123, and then it's a free app and you won't need to sign in. So then after you do that, you will go on your phone into our webpage, and on our Survey 123 Nightjar's webpage at the bottom, it has the download Nightjar survey. And once you open that, that'll add it to your app. So you won't have to go looking in the app for the actual survey, because you might not be able to find it that way. And this whole process for downloading and navigating the app, the state has made this guide, which you could see with this arrow. And this will be a step-by-step process on all of this in case this is all a little confusing, especially when trying to remember it all. And then at any point, if you have any questions or run into any problems, this app does tend to have a mind of its own sometimes. You can just email me and I can help figure it out. But the Survey 123 app, when you first download it and open it for the first time, it's gonna have these two buttons above it, and you just want to ignore those. You won't need an account. And then the continue without signing in is what you want to click. And then that paragraph is just kind of explaining to not go through the app to download the survey form. And then you'll go to the webpage, like I said. But then once you get the survey form uploaded into your app, this is what's going to show up. So it'll have the time and other questions like that. But then the survey protocol that you want to use for both incidental and passive listening is the Nighthawk's early evening, which is when we're surveying. And then the survey type, when you're at the site, you want to use the passive listening only. And then when you're in between sites and you detect a poor will or Nighthawk, you'll use the incidental detection. So even if you detect a poor will at your 6-minute time frame of listening for birds, then you'll still put that in the passive listening, even though it's an incidental species. And then when entering data on a paper data sheet, you will not need to write that anywhere, as you are expected to just use passive data collection. So you won't need to write that you're using a playback call or anything. So we just kind of assume that you're doing the same survey type. So if you're entering your data into Survey 123, you'll click the incidental detection if you run into any poor wills in between sites, like I mentioned. But going into what data is collected at each of your sites, this is the overall, like at all 10 points, you'll put the observers, the survey date, the start and end time for each stop, the protocol, which is the Nighthawk's early evening, the survey method, which is the passive listening. And then at each individual stop, you'll have the transect name, which is the numbers and letters and numbers of each site name. So that's just the number. When the state is broken up, that number and site is just the number that it is. So say you're surveying around Helena, that might be like 28A4 or something like that. So that's the transect number. And then the transect stop is just which stop you're at from 1 to 10. And the survey is just 10 stops a mile apart. And then the latitude and longitude in decimal degrees. And when you're using Survey 123, it'll have a little compass button at the top of the map, and you could just click that when you're at the site. So Pat asked if data can be collected on paper form and then transferred to Survey 123. You can. It is very helpful to me if you're instead of sending me pictures of your data forms. So you could write it out on paper and then you could go to your desktop so you won't need to download anything. And then when you get to the Survey 123 page on our website, if you click the download Survey 123, that'll just take you to a web page version of the form. And then you could just fill out all your data and submit it like that as well. So it'll also collect data on the temperature, the rain, the wind, the clouds, and then the visibility of the moon. And within each of these categories, it'll be broken up and it'll kind of say like the wind is small branches in motion, or like trees in motion would be a little too windy to survey. So that's kind of self-explanatory when you're in the app and doing that. And then the ambient noise level is just the level of disturbance and background noise around you. So if you're surveying a route that has a lot of traffic, that might be good to know, just because it might change the amount of noise that you're able to pick up on when listening for birds. And then species detection, that's just the yes or no is just the if common nighthawks are detected. And then it'll go into incidental species of if any incidental species were detected. And then if you hear a poor will, you'll say yes, and then no if you didn't. So data collection, if you click yes on that that you heard or saw a poor will, then it'll ask the time that you observe them, and then the detection method, whether you heard it, observed it, or both saw and heard it. And then the call that was detected, so it's common or display call, or both of them. And then the number of them observed. So you could just list if you saw 4 common nighthawks, you could just write 4 there. And then the direction and distance with these, you won't need a rangefinder or anything. You could just give it your best guess on if you heard a nighthawk but you didn't see it. You can say like if you think it's 200 meters away, you could just put 200, and that distance to detection is always in meters as well. So incidental species, this is pretty much the same thing. It'll ask you just the same questions as that for the nighthawks, just to get more information on your observation. So going into the paper data sheet, this is found on our website, and I can email out a copy of it as well in case you don't want to use Survey 123. And I know in some places it could be a little impossible because there's no cell service or anything, but you could always fill out the Survey 123 form, and then when you get into service, you could submit that as it will save. But then this is just a picture of what it will look like. It'll ask you the stop number, the transect name, and then the time. It's a little bit more, it's not as in detail as Survey 123. So Survey 123 is our preferred method, and Survey 123 also goes straight into the state database. Paper data sheets, it will be entered into the state database as well. And then those could also be mailed to our physical address, or you could take a picture of it and email me the picture of it, and then I'll get that entered. So this is a overall map of all of our survey sites, and it's so scattered just because it focuses in areas that we need data still from these species. So the orange sites are new sites this year, so they all have a start point, which isn't exact. So we don't really want people to just stop on the point. We want them to stop at the closest safe area to park. Some points can be found in creeks because it depends on suitable habitat around roadways. As you could see in a few slides, it'll have like the picture of all the neon green, which is just the suitable habitat, and it's specifically put around roadways. And then the yellow sites are sites that are former poor will sites, but this year we're using a common nighthawk protocol, the one that we just went over, to survey for common nighthawks. But then when you go out and do the surveys on those sites, you're more likely to hear a poor will, just because that's also an suitable habitat for them. So our poor will sites we're calling predetermined routes. So there are 34 of them, and all of the points have been previously surveyed by FWP technicians. So it makes it a little bit more reliable, and you don't have to worry so much about if the points are going to be exact and safe to park at. So within these routes, you're more likely to hear a poor will than, say, a common Nighthawk one. That doesn't mean that you won't hear a common Nighthawk. It just means, or that doesn't mean that you won't hear a common poor will. That just means that they haven't been surveyed there before using that specific poor will protocol. And then the survey also has predetermined latitude and longitudes, which you could find in the survey site map. So this is kind of what that packet looks like. All the red dots are the route, and then the order of the dots are following the same order that the technicians went in. So the one on the right, it kind of has the 1 through 5 on one road, and then the 6 through 10 on the other road. And then below it has the table of the point number and then the latitude and longitude, which you could just plug that into Google Maps or any mapping software that you use, and it'll take you to that point. So going into our new sites, all of them have a vague start point, and this is just kind of some advice on how to navigate that and make your own route. So the start points were all randomly generated near roads and suitable habitats. So no one's been to the start point before. So we don't know if it's actually safe to park it or stop your car at. So that is kind of up to you on your level of comfortability. And we pretty much just want you to stop somewhere around that point that seems safe. So if you see like a pull off near a road, but it's say a quarter mile down the road, that's completely fine. We just want to avoid the point being like the start of your survey being on the complete opposite side of your quadrant. So after you determine where you're going to stop for the first point, the idea is that you could just drive down that road in suitable habitat and stop around every 1 mile. So 1 mile is the minimum. It doesn't have to be exactly 1 mile. If you can't find anywhere to park that's safe past a mile up to like, say you keep driving and you hit 1.5 miles and you find a place that's completely fine, you'll just go a mile past that and so forth. So the point of this is not to have points scattered around your quadrant, but to have them resembling some sort of route. So finding a safe road to survey on, preferably one with less traffic if that's possible. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult, especially around big cities like Missoula or Helena or Bozeman. And then also if you see a road that is in suitable habitat or it's at the start point, but it's private property, to just move the start point to a public road. And then once you set your start point and start your survey, you just have 9 additional points a mile apart, or at least a mile apart. So this is kind of what the site map for the common Nighthawk surveys look like. So this pink start point is the starting area, but when you zoom in, the zoom in picture is not meant to say that you have to survey within that picture. It just is zoomed in like that, so you could see the names of the roads, because in the bigger map, it doesn't show any roadways or any even landmarks, which can be a little bit difficult to navigate or plan your route at. So with this point, it shows a little bit off the road near an intersection. And so if you get there and there's no pullout anywhere near there, you just want to park the closest safe space to do a survey. And then below that, it says that the point may be inaccessible, and then it also has the coordinates of that start point. So you could just kind of go off of that in the area that you want to do your survey. And then the green kind of looks like this a little bit crazy just because that's the roadways. And then the suitable habitat around that within like a mile-ish. So that's not exactly the full habitat suitability of that quadrant. It just is focused on where the roadways are as well. So you could see in this start point, it is completely off the road, probably in a field somewhere. You don't need to go to that field. You could just stay on the road, but not in the lane. Like if there's a pull off nearby, just survey from there. But yeah, going onto the citizen science waiver. So since this is a double observer method and a lot of you might be bringing your friends or loved ones, we ask that everyone involved fills out a citizen science waiver, and you could even put both names on the same form, and if you both sign it, it's fine, and make sure to put the project and the date of the project. And then you could either mail that to our physical address listed there or email me a picture of it, and then you're good to go. So going over some safety and tips for the survey is to always check the weather. It would be pretty disappointing for you if you went out without checking and it just started pouring rain and then you have to drive back home and then wait for another day. And then if you're doing a new quadrant, to plan your route beforehand. And one thing that you could do is you could go out during the daytime to check out the route and kind of scout out where you want to stop at. And then you're welcome to bring as many people as you want on these surveys, or how many people you could fit in your car. The more the merrier. But they also need to fill out a volunteer form. So Barb asked that is 1 mile minimum is straight line distance. So that's correct. So the 1 mile is kind of a like circumference, as you would say, or like the radius of that, I think. So basically you could go off your speedometer. It doesn't need to be exactly 1 mile. It's just the minimum of kind of like if you were to get a tape measure and then pull out the tape measure to a mile, that's the straight line distance. So you're correct. Sorry, I hope that wasn't too confusing. But if the road curves, then it's still like a mile from one point to the other. Not depending on the road. Okay, so sorry if that was a little bit much. But going back to safety is to always tell someone where you're going and when you expect to return. Which if you're hiking or doing anything else, you might want to think about doing that as well. And then to always be aware of your surroundings and traffic. One cool but a little bit scary thing is that some people, like in the Screech Owl surveys, they could hear mountain lions or anything, which is a really rare occurrence. Like you're probably, hopefully, not going to encounter any mountain lions or anything dangerous on this survey. Traffic would be a much bigger concern. So parking off roadways, like say like a public driveway or like a roadside pull off, and not just like fully stopping and getting out of your car in the middle of the lane. And then going into after this training, so you can go to our webpage for the survey sites and then fill out the survey site claim and kind of look at all of the available sites. Available sites will not have the 3 asterisks. Those are the claim sites already. And then plan your route and check the weather. And please email me your citizen science waiver. And then reviewing all the survey materials, getting your data entry method all set, and then you're ready to go out and survey. So a few final notes and reminders. Since this is the first year, I was hoping that I wouldn't be too confusing in this presentation, but just in case, here's some clarifications on some things. Please let me know the names of everyone you're surveying with. This is not only so then we have like records of everyone surveying, but also we want to give credit to everyone involved in this project. So like when when Lauren, who's in this call, our communication specialist, when she's going in, like putting all the volunteer names in the e-newsletter, we want to make sure that everyone's included in that. And then if you planned on conducting the double surveyor method, just to have two different sets of data. So instead of putting both of your guys' data on the same sheet, if you're doing the paper sheets, you'll want to print out two for each person for each stop. And then the survey 123 form is also you'll need a separate form for each person, but that can be done if like you both won't need to download survey 123. As long as one of you guys has survey 123, both of you guys can submit your own data in the same app, in different forms. So survey 123, you'll submit a different form for each of your stops. So if you're doing the double surveyor method, you'll have 20 forms by the end of your survey, and then if you're doing the single method, you'll have 10 forms by the end of your survey. And then if you're surveying a new route, yeah, I feel like we've gone over this a little bit, but they don't have to be exactly 1 mile apart. They just have to be at least 1 mile apart, so then birds aren't double counted. Or like if there's a bird flying, you won't run into it again by the time you get to the next stop, hopefully. And then at each site, both target and incidental species, if you're in that 6 minutes, they'll go in the passive listening of the type of survey. And then if you're driving, that'll be in the incidental type of survey, which are both in the same form within survey 123. So you won't need to download anything different if you come across a four-wheel in the road in between your sites. So this can be a lot at one time. So after this training's over, I'll send out the link to the survey sites page so you can go and claim your site, and then a copy of the citizen science waiver and survey 123 guides, as well as the paper data sheet. And then once the recording of this training will be uploaded to YouTube, I'll also send out the link to that as well, in case you'd like to reference anything. And then also, if you have any questions after this, if you can't think of anything now, you can reach out to me at going@montanaAudubon.org. And then any questions? I see that Chris says, will survey 123 work in offline mode, meaning if you don't have cell connection? As long as you have everything downloaded, you should be able to save to your outbox, which basically means that it won't submit the data. You'll have to go in when you have Wi-Fi and then send all that data in, but it should save to your phone at least. Alrighty, are there any more questions?
Yeah, can you hear me, Gwen?
Yeah.
Do you think it would be a good idea for folks to mess around with survey 123 before they get out in the field and start their survey?
Yes, if you would like to just kind of fill out a form, you don't need to put any actual data. As long as you don't submit it, you're fine, but you can kind of check out what all the questions are and different categories for like the wind and weather and things like that is definitely recommended. So Pete asked, when will you assign routes? So I won't be assigning routes. So I'll send out that link to the survey sites webpage. And once you look through that webpage, it's designated into different regions. So if you're in, say, Billings, that'll be region 5 or 7. I can't exactly remember, but it'll have the names of all the routes in the closest town or city. And then once you look through and you see any available routes that you'd like to do, you could fill out there's a button at the top of that page that says claim a route. And then once you fill that out and then you give me your top 3 priority sites, or if there's only one in your area that you're interested, you could fill that one out too. And then once you send that in, I'll check the form and then make sure it's not claimed, and then I'll email you a confirmation that that's your route. Alrighty, are there any more questions?
Hi, Gwen. First of all, thank you so much for the presentation. Great job. We'll be doing the double survey method. We only have one pair of binoculars in our household, so I'm wondering if the binoculars are an essential, necessary part. If so, we can like figure it out and secure a second pair of binoculars, but just wanted to know.
Yes, so ideally they are, but if you are like only if you only have one pair, you could still make that work. As long as you guys both see a bird, one of it's blurry to one of you, and then another can see it pretty well, that should work. Okay, Matthew asked, can you do more than one route? Of course you can. You could survey as many routes as you want. We're just trying to collect good data as well. And thank you all for coming. And then Chris said, can we survey multiple times during the survey period or only once? So the protocol is like either 2 surveys with 1 person or 1 survey with 2 people. So we're just trying to stick to that. If you're feeling pretty ambitious, you're welcome to survey more times. That's just more data that we can kind of check over, and so that doesn't hurt anything. Alrighty, so wrapping up a little bit, you could always, if you have any more questions, you could always email me or call our office. But thank you all for coming. Have a great night.
Thanks, Gwen.
Thank you all.